to being human. According to our textbook, about 90% of human cerebral cortex is neocortex. It is involved in higher functions such as sensory perception, generation of motor commands, spatial reasoning, conscious thought, and in us, in humans, language. So I put this here, food for thought. Are psychedelics currently contributing to our evolution? My guess is yes. If we are promoting neuroplasticity in our brain and we're promoting neurogenesis in our brain, and literally growing our brain, changing its anatomical structures and physiology through the use of just compounds in general, not just psychedelics, through our diet, which is what Terence McKenna was saying in terms of stoned ape theory. It's our diet that allowed us to evolve. Yeah. So another thing about this, about the stoned ape theory, is Terence McKenna suggests that the reason being for one of the reasons being for psychedelics, or specifically actually mushrooms, he thought that we as as hominids would follow herds of cattle, and by following herds of cattle as hunter-gatherers, we inevitably came across their manure, and in their manure were mushroom patties, so huge ones too. So he suggested that they were hard to miss, and we had to have at some point eaten them. So that would be our diet right there. So those types of psilocybin and LSD have been shown to increase our visual acuity, so if by increasing our visual acuity, we became better hunters and gatherers, and the ones that ate the mushrooms that did that survived and reproduced more. So that is another connection that he made to evolution. So here we have the three brains. This is the reptilian complex, the limbic system, mammalian. So this one says survival and reproduction. We only needed that for survival and reproduction. Limbic system gives us emotions, empathy, parental, and then neocortex, logic, abstract thought. The human brain only has that. So this study here is one done on with application. This is a brain that has of an individual that had ingested acid, this lysergic acid, and so this is the brain of an individual who has ingested LSD. As you can see, there is specific. This is the placebo. The cerebral brain fluid of the placebo, and then this is the one on LSD. And as you can see, this is the one minus. Okay. So in this study, this is a study of an individual's brain who ingested LSD, and what this is showing here is a concentration of cerebral blood fluid in a specific area associated with the visual circuitry of our brain. And so this is straight out of this study. It says increased visual cortex cerebral blood flow, decreased visual cortex alpha power, and greatly expanded primary visual cortex functional connectivity profile correlated strongly with ratings of visual hallucinations, implying that intrinsic brain activity exerts a greater influence on visual processing in psychedelic state, thereby defining its hallucinatory quality. Same study. The same study said decreased connectivity between parahippocampus and retrosplenial cortex correlated strongly with ratings of ego dissolution, altered meaning, implying the importance of this particular circuit for the maintenance of self or ego and its processing of meaning. So it also says that psychedelic interruption of corticostriato-thalamocortical loops that inhibit the lower brain structure's sensory gating systems results in enhanced availability of information normally repressed by these symptoms. So, yeah, that's how we get our visual acuity increased. So, before we move on to psychology, I have a few like things I wanted to discuss and kind of questions that I had. When I first learned about serotonin's ability to influence genetic expression, my head spun and I wondered what the possible outcomes of this altered genetic expression could be. My research was inconclusive when searching for these outcomes. My guess is that this altered genetic expression manifests itself as alterations in sensory and perception that users of psychedelics report. If you think about it, serotonin is a universal system-wide neurotransmitter. This would explain the huge variety in symptoms that have been reported by users. My interpretation of ecstasis is we are breaking the first barrier. The first barrier okay, so another question that kept popping up in my head during all of this research was the role of glial cells in all of this. After reading about glial cells in our textbook, I've been waiting to find more information on glial cells. According to our textbook, there are 10 times as many glial cells as neurons. For decades, it was thought that glial cells function mainly to provide support for neurons by providing them with nutrition, clearing waste, and forming a physical matrix to hold neural circuits together. More recent research has shown that they also exchange chemical signals with neurons and other glial cells to control the establishment and maintenance of synapses between neurons. They have also been found to modulate neural activity and control the blood-brain barrier. It has also been suggested that glial networks may be the dwelling places of thoughts. What could the altered expression of DNA have on glial cells, and how would this manifest in a user's experience? What could the altered expression of DNA have on glial cells, and how would this manifest in a user's experience? Okay, so psychology of psychedelics. Psychedelics and the DMN, default mode network. Acutely tryptamine-based psychedelics, LSD, ayahuasca, psilocybin appear to disrupt and diminish normal DMN activity. Changes correlated with connection of brain regions that are not normally connected, ego dissolution, introspection or mindfulness, reset or rewiring of dysfunctional DMN connections, long-term improvement in psychosocial functioning. So, what like the DMN? I didn't know what that was at first, but apparently it's a group of functionally connected brain regions. It is active when the brain is at rest and during self-referential activity. A lot of times, dysfunctional connectivity is implicated in many psychiatric and neurologic disorders. Interesting stuff. So, psychedelics in clinical practice. Psychedelic assisted psychotherapy is used often. So, psychedelics in clinical practice. Psychedelic assisted psychotherapy, that's what they call treatment using psychedelics. So these are some that they're currently either approved. Ketamine's been FDA approved. MDMA is going through. FDA has designated it as a breakthrough treatment for PTSD and I believe depression as well. There's a lot of research going into LSD and psilocybin. Alcoholism for LSD, anxiety, depression for psilocybin. One thing that I came across though, in not just my own studies but also in the lecture that I went to, is that mental illness is less common among those that use psychedelics, and that was the results of a meta-analysis of data of, I believe they said 30 million Americans that have tried psychedelics. So, important. So, important experiments. So, in the 1960s, James Fadiman, a researcher at the International Foundation for Advanced Study, was a facilitator of an experiment that brought together 27 test subjects that included engineers, architects, and mathematicians from institutions like Stanford and Hewlett-Packard. These participants were specifically selected because the months leading up to the experiment, they were struggling to solve a highly technical problem without success. Half were administered 50 micrograms of LSD, and the other half received 100 milligrams of mescaline. Both of them are kind of considered mid-level doses. After being administered several cognitive performance enhancements, enhancement assessments and spending 4 hours working on their problems, tests showed as much as 200% boost in creativity, but they were also able to come up with real-world breakthroughs, like the design of a linear electron accelerator, but they also were able to come up with real-world breakthroughs, like design of a linear electron accelerator beam steering device, a mathematical theorem regarding NOR gate circuits. Both of those I really don't know what they are, but that's the linear accelerator, electron accelerator steering device, and then that's the NOR gate system. They also came up with a new design for a vibratory microtome, a space probe designed to measure solar properties, and a new conceptual model of a photon, excuse me. Another experiment, known as the Good Friday experiment, involved 20 seminary students at Boston University's Marsh Chapel. 10 of them were given psilocybin, the other 10 were given niacin as a placebo. They all went into chapel to attend a Good Friday service. The subjects then rated the service for mystical qualities such as sacredness, ineffability, distortion of time and space, and sense of oneness with the divine. Higher ratings were gathered from the psilocybin group. Even months later, the psilocybin group reported persistent beneficial effects on their attitude and behavior, and deepened their religious faith. 9 out of 10 of the placebo group ended up becoming ministers, and none of the placebo group became ministers. So transpersonal states, the common characteristics of them: an out-of-body experience, sense of ego dissolution, transcendence beyond ego identity, awareness of transcending conventional time and space, properties, visits to mystical and spiritual realms, psychic or paranormal encounters, temporary access to greater power, encounters with archetypal symbols, beings and creatures, realizations and dreams of past and or future life incarnations, visits to dimensions of reality, experiencing death and or reliving the birth process, sense of bliss and sacredness, deep feelings of gratitude, peace and love, feelings of interconnectedness with all things, intuitive understandings of universal truths and knowledge, experiencing singularity with God. So these two here are very interesting to me. The feelings of interconnectedness with all things and intuitive understandings of universal truths and knowledge, because they lead me to my conclusion. And my conclusion brings up the biopsychosocial perspective. What is the biopsychosocial? So my conclusion brings up it connects non-ordinary states of consciousness with the biopsychosocial perspective. So what is the biopsychosocial perspective? The biopsychosocial perspective is a model that looks at the interaction between biological, psychological, and socio-environmental factors in human behavior. We have talked about the biological underpinnings of non-ordinary states of consciousness. We have also talked about the psychological implications. We have also talked about the psychological implications of non-ordinary states of consciousness, but what about the socio-environmental implications? I think it's important that we discuss what effect this would have on a sociological level. That is, the impact that it would have on society. One impact I would hope our research into non-ordinary states of consciousness would provide is the coming together of individuals and to live our lives together instead of looking for differences to divide us. I have seen strong correlations between a number of experiences that I have come across in my research. In the beginning of the semester, we watched a video about Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor and how she suffered a stroke that impaired the left hemisphere of her brain, the result being a profound experience during which she said, "I believe that the more time we spend choosing to run the deep interpiece circuitries of our right hemispheres, the more peace we will introduce into the world." During her experience, her ability to define physical boundaries visually between her body and the rest of her surroundings was impaired. However, I think this boundary goes beyond the visual senses. To me, this demonstrates a correlation with Buddhist teachings in that we are all connected. Buddhist monks who train in meditation for their entire lives incorporate the principle of equality, that all living entities are equal in their philosophy. In the book Stealing Fire, Jason Silva, narrator of the show Brain Games on the National Geographic Channel, was quoted saying, "A Buddhist monk experiencing Satori while meditating in a cave, or a nuclear physicist having a breakthrough insight in the lab, or a fire spinner at Burning Man, look at the different experiences from the outside, but they look like different experiences from the outside, but they feel similar from the inside. It's a shared commonality, a bond linking us all together. The ecstatic is a language without words that we all speak." They go on to say that the four common themes of non-ordinary states of consciousness manifest regardless of who is experiencing them and how they are. They are selflessness, timelessness, effortlessness, and richness. This all sounds very hippie-esque, but I know, trust me, but I believe the hippies were onto something. Unfortunately, they just lacked the language and technology to adequately define their experience. Okay, now my point. The socio-environmental impact that non-ordinary states of consciousness may have for us is solving problems that we are having as a community, one community, in a socioeconomically stratified society. Many suffer, while few hoard wealth. Neocolonialism deprives the third world countries of natural resources and wealth, while those same countries are the biggest contributors to the human ecological footprint. Many of us are already on the same page that these trends need to end. Others believe differently, perhaps selfishly. However, one major factor is more apparent today than before: overpopulation. As the global population grows, our Earth gets smaller. Resources become more scarce. There's literally less space for everyone. And as this happens, cultures collide amidst mass migrations caused by war and climate change. Religious extremism is just one symptom of this. Friction is inevitable. Non-ordinary states of consciousness offer us a chance to see the big picture, that we are all in this together, whether we like it or not. And as time goes on and the population grows, what affects one person affects all of us more and more. Bridge divides, dissolve boundaries, break barriers, tear down walls. This is the potential social impacts of the benefits of non-ordinary states of consciousness may accomplish, aiding us in our never-ending journey towards a utopic society. So in conclusion, I added this quote: "The alternative is unconsciousness, the default setting, the rat race, the constant gnawing sense of having lost some infinite thing." David Foster Wallace. Thank you for enduring this long... thank you for watching and enduring this long rant on non-ordinary states of consciousness. And that's it.